Welcome to Fast Politics, Will Sommer.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We needed to talk about what the fuck is going on because the MAGA media industrial complex is so in the zeitgeist at this moment. It makes for a lot of even more dysfunction than the usual dysfunction. So I would love for you, I think of you as the guy who knows about the MAGA media complex, to explain to us where are our favorite, or in this case, least favorite players? Where do we find them in 2025?
They're thriving for the most part. I mean, I think they're enjoying more influence than we ever could have imagined. I mean, the White House now this week has held 3 influencer briefings where they kind of bring in
3?
3, yeah, and there's probably another one,
Wow.
another one coming this week. I mean, it's like day to day.
Lucky
And so
us.
they'd bring in, sort of a sideshow, freak show, perhaps, if I could say
So
as much,
it's
and
Posobiec. It's who else?
well, they have a new cast every day, and they have a new. At least one of them will have some sordid backstory. They had a woman on Monday this Texas woman who is most famous previously for thinking the moon disappeared. She had tweeted, "Anyone seen the moon in a while? I think it went away."
Yeah,
Yeah, we
makes
got Jack
sense.
Posobiec. We've got CJ Pearson, who's kind of like a young MAGA guy.
Okay.
We've got this guy named Dom Luker, who's like a conspiracy theorist who's very popular on Twitter. He famously was banned from Twitter for posting child porn.
Yeah.
That he got back on. I mean, it's a real rogues gallery.
So this crew, they do the MAGA briefings. And are the MAGA briefings any different than the regular
Yeah, I would say the
press
tone is
briefings?
different. I mean, Caroline Levitt acts like, she's going over to her best friend's house. I mean, she says, "Oh my gosh, I could go around with you guys all day. We're having so much fun." And then she poses for pictures with them. I mean, and they ask these questions like, famously, I think the one a lot of people saw on social media was Link Lauren, who's kind of like a RFK crony. He looks like Draco Malfoy. So he's got like the platinum hair, and he got up there
Nice.
and he said, "Caroline, like you're such an inspiration for American moms. By
Oh, yeah,
comparison,
I
so many
saw that.
yeah,
Go
so many
on.
parents were killing themselves under the Biden administration because he was such a bad president. How do you do it?" And it's a lot along those lines.
But they also have, during the regular briefings, they have a new media seat, which is a MAGA influencer seat. So explain what that is.
Yeah, so the new media seat is this seat, such as it is, that they made, and it's right by the press secretary. They claim it's to open things up, but traditionally, or what it's been so far is, I would say, 80 to 90% MAGA, either from a right wing outlet or even more ridiculously, just like someone with a Twitter account or an Instagram account.
Right.
And then every so often they'll put in, like, they put Axios there the first day. They put the Philly Inquirer a few days ago, the famous, like, 200-year-old newspaper, but like clearly they're trying to make it not just all MAGA, so they have a little plausible deniability. And so then those people ask questions like Tim Pool famously was in it last week, and he said, wouldn't you say that, like, the media is a bunch of scumbags essentially, and that
Yeah.
they're so rude to me and the rest of the new media crew? So, this is what the press operation looks like at the White House these days.
Tim Pool, like, he's clearly losing his hair. Just, we know the beanie
Look,
is not fooling anyone.
he's not the first guy to go bald, and it is fascinating that he's sticking with the beanie. I mean, he wore it to Mar-a-Lago to some like gala, so he's wearing
It's
like a tux and a beanie, and he doesn't even have a formal beanie. It's like always the same beanie. So
It
I
is
don't think it's a great look.
summer. I feel like the beanie, when it hits summer, like, you gotta there's no one else wearing a winter hat.
Right. I mean, yeah. Someone pointed out, like, when he was at the White House wearing the beanie, the temperature in DC was like 80 degrees.
I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So let's talk about what sort of where we are with this crew. We have Laura Loomer, who is pretty much in and out of this White House, as far as I can tell. Mike Walls, I don't know if he got fired or if he left at his own volition, but he is out as we tape this. Talk to me about sort of Loomer's influence here.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I mean, so Laura Loomer has been on this campaign for a month or so to purge elements of the National Security Council. This started a few days after Signalgate kicked off. And she was really successful, and she got a bunch of people fired. She maybe got the head of the National Security Agency as also fired at the time.
Wow, that's
Um,
nice.
and I mean, she met with Trump to do all this stuff. And then, and what's fascinating to me is like this is someone who a few years ago, even within MAGA world, was like persona non grata. I mean, she chained herself to the door of Twitter. She did all these really desperate stunts that even those people were like, oh boy, I don't know if I want to associate with this person. And now she's, I don't know, the most powerful person in the national security apparatus outside of government. I mean, so today she got who's to say why we don't really know yet quite why Mike Waltz was fired, but his
Do we
deputy,
know he was fired, or do we think he just left?
I don't think it's confirmed, but I think it's probably fair to say that he was fired. His
Yeah.
deputy, Alex Wong, who was Loomer's number one target, and so she tweeted "scalp." So she obviously, I think, is trying to take credit at least for Wong getting fired. There's so much like criminology that goes into what's going on here. I mean, how much is she acting on behalf of like a rival faction within the Trump administration? Are they digging up this stuff? It gets very complex, but we have to speculate a lot. But I think the idea that she has any sort of influence over the administration, especially this much influence, is really wild.
It is wild. Wild is the word. So I just want you to kind of explain to us, there is this same group of media influencers. There's a certain kind of Trumpy, there's like a lot of money making going on here too. Can you talk us through like meme coins? There's a lot of like Liberty. I saw Liberty Financial has gotten involved again. I remember them from CPAC. Like, it seems like a lot of people are making money on this admin in ways they maybe didn't the first administration.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the one that's top of mind is the Times just has an article now about how Trump coin, the Abu Dhabi government is going to do a deal for $2 billion involving Trump coin, involving the cryptocurrency exchange Binance. As the Times said, like there's one, and of course the guy announcing this is the son of Steve Witkoff. So the Times says, even within this sentence, there are so many conflicts of interest in this one or two lines that he said describing this deal. It's true. I mean, there's just every which way. I mean, it's almost hard to keep your eye on all the conflicts of interest and all the grifts. But I agree with you that it seems, in the first administration, we were talking about like our foreign governments buying rooms at the Trump hotel. And so what is that bringing in? Hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now we're talking about potentially billions of dollars.
It seems like a lot more money, and it also seems like this crew is more embedded than they were last time. Wonder if you could talk about that. Like, in 2016, there was a MAGA media, but it was not as developed, and there still was a mainstream media. I feel like now there isn't as much mainstream media, and the MAGA media is so developed that they don't all it's almost like they don't need the mainstream media anymore. So talk to us about that.
I think that's right. I mean, I think the Trump White House is being very smart about giving just a huge amount of access to these right wing media figures. We mentioned the influencer briefing, but they're also bringing them in. I think at least twice a month at this point. Bring people in to just interview cabinet secretaries and just do these kind of like very like messaging type things with talk radio hosts, Instagram influencers, whatever. I think the administration is sort of trying to edge out the mainstream media and just sort of issue more pronouncements through outlets that they control. And so we're seeing that. Also, I mean, a lot of these people are literally in the government. The FBI director, Kash Patel, was a big right wing media figure. Dan Bongino, the deputy FBI director. I mean, Pete Hegseth, right? I mean, there's so many examples of this. I just had a story today about Harmeet Dillon, who is sort of famous as like a MAGA media legal figure, who's now the deputy of the head of the DOJ's civil rights division, and seems
Yes.
to spend most of her day just tweeting to her followers about what she's up to. In a way, it's like these right wing media figures are they're in the government, but they seem to still see themselves as right wing media figures with audiences they have to feed and stuff like that.
I have 2 questions about Hamid Dillon and also Kash Patel. These guys were media people. Are they doing their jobs now? Like, it seems like Kash Patel seems, I mean, we probably shouldn't say this because 'cause we're all gonna end up in Gitmo, but he seems awfully quiet.
Yes, he does. Well, famously, he doesn't live in DC. I believe he lives in Las Vegas,
Right.
and is sort of commuting, such as it is. A lot of these people, I think they're doing did the job with kind of an eye on the right wing audience and the MAGA base. I think about Pam Bondi handing out those Epstein binders to
Yeah.
the right wing influencers, supposedly because she felt like she hadn't wooed them enough, which is like a legitimate concern for her when we see that Laura Loomer can kind of chop heads off on the NSC. Similarly, you have someone like Dan Bongino who is constantly posting like, stop bugging me. We're working on it. Just around the corner, big results ahead. So, these people are really like forward facing towards the public in a way that, he told all the FBI field office directors that they need to get on social media. And so now they're all these like old white guys in suits are recording like short form video content.
How much of this is the actual job? Media influencer and the civil rights division don't seem like a Venn diagram with a lot of mutual,
You would think, I think traditionally, I was thinking about it and I was like, well, how did the previous heads of the Civil Rights Division act? And obviously it's no one we've ever heard of, because
right.
these are
Right, right,
government
right.
bureaucrats. But when you think about, I mean, in Harvey Dillon's case, I mean, she is turning this office into, what was once about police brutality, voting rights, et cetera. And now it's going to be about, focusing on quote anti-Christian discrimination, trans women in sports, this kind of stuff. And so, it's more right wing culture war. That's why roughly half the lawyers are expected to quit there. So I think, if you look at it from that perspective, as like, how can I get on Fox News? How can I do podcasts? I
Right.
mean, that all makes sense. She tweeted at one point, okay, like first week on the job, what podcast should I go on? And a lot of her fans
Oh.
said, hey, you were supposed to be sending Hillary Clinton to Guantanamo Bay. What are you
Yeah,
doing?
yeah. It does seem like there's a real tension there between doing their job and delivering for MAGA. What one of the things we're talking about these Epstein binders, when Bondi gave the Epstein binders to the influencers, some of them were actually pretty disappointed about what was in them. So talk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, there's this tension between I think the conservative base and the audience, and these personalities as well has been raised and taught to that they can basically have whatever they want. And if they don't, it's because the deep state is betraying them, or the rhinos are after them, or whatever. We saw this in the 2020 election where Fox is saying, "Oh my gosh, we have to tell them the election was stolen because our audience is so mad they believe it is." And so in this case, let's take the Epstein binders. I mean, Pam Bondi claimed at one point the Epstein client list was on her desk and they were all
Right.
getting ready to release it. So, everyone who's familiar with Epstein stuff says, well, actually, that client list probably is mythical. That doesn't really exist. So instead, she gets some documents that are kind of already public or whatever. We can look at our Robert F. Kennedy, who is obviously a big anti-vaccine guy. Then suddenly, two children die in Texas of measles, and he
Right.
has to come out and say, "Well, yeah, I guess you should take the measles vaccine." Although he's now walking that back and saying, "Well, it's reasonable for people not to want to take the vaccine, and we need to take care of them in other ways, and maybe it's not that big a deal."
That's sort of where I'm getting to with this. I would love to get back to this, just the Epstein stuff for a second. There is no there there. I mean, there's there, but there's no new information there, right? As far as you can tell?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of like the JFK files. I think there's
Right.
material that could come out that would be interesting to people who have followed the case really closely. It's like, oh, that adds sort of a new detail we didn't know. But I think that in terms of like, these
Client list,
people,
that kind of
yeah,
thing.
right. I mean, they're expecting like Oprah and Tom Hanks and all these other people to
Right.
be on this list. They expect like every prominent liberal to be on the list. And, so for in Pam Bondi's case, I mean, that means she has to, what's she gonna do? I don't know. I mean, I think she has tried to delay this as long as possible. Reporting from our colleague Noah Shackman claims that prosecutors in New York have basically all been detailed to redacting these files and getting them ready to release, such as they are. At the same time, we have someone like Anna Paulina Luna in Congress, the Republican, putting pressure on and saying like, "Hey, Pam Bondi, it's time to put out the files." So, I think Pam Bondi's in a tough spot there.
And this is the RFK stuff. They're all in an impossible situation, right? RFK clearly, we saw this today. They're making moves to try to go after vaccines. There's a new placebo testing way to test a vaccine, completely unnecessary, meant to make life harder for vaccine companies. It strikes me that RFK Jr., anything less than taking away vaccines will be a failure on his part, right?
I think that's right. I mean, look, I mean, these people have been taught that vaccines are, killing people and all this stuff. And so then for the government to say, well, I don't know, maybe we'll just make the vaccine development a little slower, but the poison will still come out. I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Right,
I've been reading, these RFK supporters and how they're grappling with it. And one of these influencers was saying, well, RFK maybe doesn't have the political clout to ban vaccines, but maybe he can kind of nibble at it around the edges, which sort of makes sense, I guess. But at the same time, I mean, if this situation is as dire as they claim it is, you would think that they'd be more aggressive. I think a lot of the anti-vaccine people are also concerned that he's focused too much on these more palatable political goals, like banning artificial dyes and foods. And from their perspective, like they couldn't care less about that. I mean, why do they care if
right.
hot Cheetos are a little less bright? I mean, they think this is kind of this like huge struggle in terms of vaccines.
Is there stuff getting accomplished on the food dye side?
Well, it's very vague. I mean, there's been a lot of, it's kind of a very Trumpian, I think about the tariffs and oh, we have a
Right.
deal. No, we have a deal to discuss a deal, this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
so in the same way, RK is saying, well, I'm maybe meeting with these food companies and, meanwhile, absolutely slashing the budget for researching and, finding out new medical cures and stuff like that.
Yeah. Just tell me what you're watching at this minute in the MAGA media industrial complex.
I'm always interested in these influencers that the White House is elevating. I think that's interesting. I feel like there's going to be an appetite for clearly if Trump sticks with the tariffs. I think the administration is about to hit a really rough patch, and I'm looking
Mhm.
out for if there's going to be a new QAnon type thing that really takes things from kind of Fox News talking points into like a realm of new reality, where we
Mm.
can say, well, the real reason Trump is failing is because of this sinister
Mhm.
cabal or something like that. Because I think obviously Trump will lose supporters, but I think the kind of the hardcore base is going to look for something that is so crazy that they can just ignore what's going on, and so what that looks like, I don't know, but I'm looking for it.
So interesting. Thank you, Will Sommer.
Hey, thanks for having me.